This video is sponsored by Focus Home Interactive. To a lot of wargaming fans, the late 80s to mid 90s is considered to be something of a golden age when it comes to Games Workshop releases. Hero Quest, Blood Bowl, Space Crusade, the first Warhammer 40k and fantasy box sets, Space Hulk, Man of War, Epic. Even the paint sets from the time are considered classics, but in this video I'd like to talk about my favourite release from the period, Necromunda. I love this game. So this video will probably end up being a little bit more than a simple unboxing, maybe more an unravelling. And even though this 1995 box is incredibly hard to get hold of these days, I'm going to share with you why I think this version of Necromunda is the best way for newcomers to the hobby to start playing tabletop games, which, if you already have a few human sci-fi models, you can start playing for free right now. I'll tell you more about that later in the video. I realise this is going to be a little bit longer than my usual videos, so I've added some quick links to specific bits in the video description and pinned in the comments, just in case you want to quickly find the bit you want, or revisit them later. Necromunda is a skirmish game set in the grimdark sci-fi future of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The game takes place within Hive Primus, an overpopulated megastructure on the toxic industrial planet Necromunda. So let's check out this amazing box. This copy isn't sealed, obviously, but the seller said it was in great condition and it looks pretty good to me. The box art really sets the scene for the game. Painted by the superb illustrator Jeff Taylor, you know exactly what you're getting yourself in for here. Muscle-bound brutes blasting, hacking and slashing in a high-rise industrial zone, like a love child of Blade Runner, Mad Max and 80s professional wrestling. Definitely fantasy in space rather than the traditional clean sci-fi illustration style. On the back of the box, you've got a big picture of all the stuff that's included inside, shown unpainted so as not to get your hopes up if this is your first experience of Games Workshop stuff. There's also a bit of scene-setting text. What's that? Do the grimdark voice. Okay, just for you.
Necromunda, a giant world of hive cities and glittering spires crouched upon a dark underworld of anarchy and violence. In the subterranean depths, the hard-bitten survivors of Necromunda's many terrors stalk through crumbling domes and ancient machines, fighting and dying for the spoils of a derelict civilization.
Okay, let's crack this baby open and see what retro delights await us inside. There's quite a lot to unpack here, literally. First off, let's get these books out of the way. So, in no particular order, let's see what we have here. Oh yes, the World of Hobby Games brochure. I actually sent off for this in my last retro unboxing video. I haven't had anything back from Games Workshop yet, but at least I managed to get my hands on this brochure one way or another. This is basically a promotional booklet that they gave out at every opportunity. It explains the concept of building, painting, and playing with miniatures at a beginner level. At the start of the book, there's loads of gorgeous aspirational battle scenes, amazingly painted models, and even an example step-by-step game of Warhammer Fantasy to give you a taste of the rules. Then there's a section about Warhammer 40,000, again with some cool scenes and models. There's a store finder, only 2 stores in the USA. Crazy. I wonder how many they have now. There's some amazingly 90s photos of tabletop war being raged in Games Workshop stores. Some seriously amazing haircuts going on here. This guy looks like he's really enjoying himself. I mean, times have changed, but band t-shirts and anime hoodies are still pretty standard gaming store apparel. Apart from the grass green bases and bowl cuts, these photos could have been taken last week. There's the ubiquitous ad for White Dwarf, a couple of pages of fantastically painted miniatures from the Heavy Metal team, the spread about their mail order system, a couple of pages on how to build your own gaming table and basic terrain pieces, and even some adorable advice on how to find players in your area. There's a little bit about Games Workshop's Games Day, and on the back cover there's a couple more impressive set pieces showcasing 40k and fantasy. So next up we've got this Citadel painting guide with even more gloriously 90s model photos in it, and a few pages covering the equipment you need, how to assemble both metal and plastic models, how to undercoat, how to mix and thin your paints, and some basic how-to steps. It's actually a really nice guide, quite easy to follow, and finishes with more cool 40k and fantasy minis in glorious Technicolor. Aha, right, now we're actually getting to the Necromunda stuff. There's 2 of these Necromunda playsheets made of thick card. These detail the core principles of the game so you can quickly reference them as you play, so you're not having to flip through the manual constantly to check things. All the basics for movement, shooting, and hand-to-hand, and leadership phases are right here, as well as all the weapon stats for the stuff that's included in the box. Pretty handy. I think it should be a law somewhere that every tabletop game should come with something like this. Next, we've got this little Get Started booklet for the game itself. Now, in the text on the front, it straight up admits that it's a complicated game and that you should follow this guide to learn the basics. In classic Read This First style, it has a quick guide on assembling the minis, building the terrain, and an example skirmish between an Orlock and a Goliath. There's some examples of all the different buildings you can create using the stuff in the box, and the last few pages are blank gang sheets for you to either write in or photocopy. Necromunda was very pen and paper, and I know the idea of admin and a brutal, grimdark skirmish game might seem pretty boring, but it was just so well written, engaging, and often pretty hilarious that the post-game RPG element was just as fun as playing the physical game. We'll touch on that a little bit more later. There's also a dedicated Necromunda painting and modelling booklet, which again covers some quick painting tips, but also really strongly encourages you to kit bash and convert your models to personalise your gangs. And on top of showing you some example layouts for your new terrain, it also covers how to scratch build your own walkways and buildings using cereal boxes, a method I'm still using to this day. It also says that you should experiment with household junk and bits and pieces. Basically, this booklet just became my channel. Also, I absolutely love this bit of text on the back cover. Necromunda gangs do not wear uniforms. It basically tells you outright to think outside the box, experiment and have fun. Also, look at all these amazingly hideous models. I love them. Okay, time for the serious stuff. This is the Necromunda Rulebook. As you'd expect, this covers the mechanics of the gameplay itself, and is packed with really useful visual references too, like this example that shows you when the models are in cover, in partial cover, or out in the open, to minimise any contention when you're actually playing the game. The rules are like a slightly more stylised version of Warhammer 40k 2nd edition, mixed with some of the more fun, quirky things from Rogue Trader. I mean, Necromunda was mostly written by Rick Priestley, so that explains a lot of the similarities. Jamming weapons, running out of ammo, grenades that explode before you throw them, stupidity tests, frenzied fighters, jumping off buildings. There's a lot of character to these rules, and all of these pages are framed in these really stylish industrial borders and illustrated with painted, sketched, and airbrushed inked illustrations. I know creating good digital art still takes an enormous amount of skill, but I think it definitely lacks some of the charm of this handmade stuff, even if it looks a little bit shonky by today's standards. The latter part of the rulebook has an armoury of all the weapons and special equipment available to the gangs in Necromunda, standard fare for the Imperium of Man. It might seem like a pretty basic selection, but these weapons could be augmented with special ammo, laser sights, and other cool things that your gang could buy from weapon merchants in the post-game phase. At the end of the rulebook, there's a catalogue showcasing all of the available Necromunda miniatures, over 70 models made just for the game. They really hit the ground running with this. By contrast, their 2017 remake launched with just 2 gangs, releasing a new one every few months. But let's not jump to the present day just yet. On the back cover, we've got some more beautifully painted models and a cool scene showing totally scratch-built terrain. It looks really great actually, and fairly easy to build. Maybe I'll give it a go in a future video. I absolutely love all these cheesy captions too. You don't need muscles to be in House Goliath, but it helps. Don't mess with me, an Escher Juve with attitude. Amazing. The final Necromunda related book is the Sourcebook. Where the rulebook handles the gameplay, the Sourcebook focuses on the RPG elements of the game. Backstory of the world and its inhabitants, info on the gangs and how to build your lists. It also details how gangs earn experience during the game, and how fighters essentially level up with new skills and abilities. Although each gang chooses from a similar pool of weapons, their available upgrade trees are very different, meaning that fresh gangs start off in a very similar way, making the learning experience a bit easier for new players, and then as you progress and become more comfortable with the rules and game mechanics, your individual fighters will become more unique and aligned with whatever faction you choose. So for example, the big muscly meathead Goliaths can never upgrade using the agility skills, but all of their gangers, even the new recruits, can upgrade with muscle skills, which are reserved only to dedicated heavies of other gangs. The skill upgrades are also full of character, just sticking with the muscle tree as that's what we've been talking about. Depending on your dice roll, your ganger might end up being able to body slam people, move and fire heavy weapons, learn how to deliver crushing blows and devastating headbutts, throw your opponents off buildings, or just become generally harder to hurt. There are 7 upgrade trees in total: combat, ferocity, shooting, stealth, techno, agility, and muscle. Each of these has 6 abilities, so your gang of inexperienced newbies quickly transform into a uniquely skilled force of mercenaries. Now, it isn't all boons though. Depending on what injuries your gangers sustain in the game, they'll probably end up with a variety of debilitating problems that affect their play. I mean, sure, there's a chance they might just die if they go out of action, but they might just sustain a leg wound, reducing their movement by 1 forever. They might be blinded in one eye, reducing their ballistic skill by 1. Then again, they might just end up hating whatever gang put them out of action. There are loads of unique options, and the post-game dice rolls are always pretty entertaining. The random D66 dice rolling element is also used to see what items your local trading post has in stock. You never know, you might just find a new bionic leg that'll fix your recently crippled ganger. Not only will it fix him, but it'll also make him better at close combat, letting him hoof people off tall buildings. This is where the strength of Necromunda lies, I think. In your first game, everyone is basically the same, but after a few games, you'll have a sneaky space pirate hopping all over the place with a grappling hook and a power sword, an unarmed brute on a headbutt frenzy, or a dead-eye sniper with a scope and a lasgun that never runs out of ammo. Well, lasguns are also pretty good in this game. Finally, there's a roundup of the common scenarios that you can play within a campaign. When I was 11 or 12 and trying to learn Necromunda for the first time, I would have loved there to be a DOS game that let you do all the fun playing bits and did all the back-end calculations and hard work for you. I did end up eventually learning to love grimdark accountancy though. Speaking of computer games, before we take a look at the minis and terrain in this box, let's fast forward to 2020 again just for a minute. Necromunda Underhive Wars has been released for PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. As I said at the start of the video, this episode has been kindly sponsored by Focus Home Interactive, so let's talk about the new game. Necromunda Underhive Wars is basically all the stuff I just described about the tabletop game, but as a turn-based cinematic tactical squad RPG. I've been absolutely rinsing games like Battletech, Mechanicus and XCOM 2 over the past few months, and this fits in beautifully with those. If you want XCOM in the Underhive, this game will tick all your boxes. The game features 3 of Necromunda's traditional gangs, Orlock, Goliath and Escher, but it doesn't feel like it's incomplete. I imagine that Van Saar, Delac and Cawdor will all be added as DLC further down the line, but the campaign in the base game is fun. The squad progression, war gear options and cosmetic customizations go well beyond XCOM, for example. I haven't finished the campaign yet, but I'm already kind of looking forward to playing it through again so I can try out some different things. I suppose because of that it has pretty great replay value. There's also online multiplayer with up to 4 players, which sounds pretty crazy. Now, I know I'm basically the target audience for a game like this, but being honest here, Focus hit that target pretty dead on. When I do eventually finish it, it'll get added to the list, probably with an 8 out of 10. A solid score. I mean, no game's perfect after all.
What a shame.
Apart from Deus Ex. My only real gripe is that some of the voiceovers are a bit cheesy. I mean, I'm one to talk, but the sound design and music are fantastic. I think this is definitely my favourite 40k universe game so far. If you want to try it out for yourself, follow the link in the description to let Focus know that I sent you. Okay, let's hit rewind and start unpacking the miniatures from the box. Here's the first little baggie, and inside we've got all of the Orlock gangers. There are 12 minis split into 2 poses. One body type has a knife and a swappable pistol arm, and you get your choice of bolt pistols, stub guns, auto pistols and las pistols to choose from. This always confused me a bit actually, because Orlocks don't have access to bolt pistols in their starting gear, not even the leaders. You had to buy it from trading posts in the game. The arms are push fit, so it was a bit easier to try out different weapon options in the game before you started gluing everything together. The other body type carries a ranged weapon, and the box gives you a mix of auto guns, las guns and shotguns to outfit your gang. So even though this box doesn't have anything on the sprue, I do actually have one of these sprues in my secret retro stash. So for curiosity's sake, this is what it looks like. Now let's take a look inside baggie number 2 and check out the Goliaths. Again, 12 bodies in 2 different styles. One is holding a giant knife and can be equipped with a pistol arm, and the other pose can be equipped with a ranged weapon, but has, let's just say one of the weirder poses from the time. I don't know if he's supposed to be flexing his muscles, but it kind of looks like he's telling a child off for not tidying his room with his hand on his hip and a shotgun. Some of these Goliaths have been painted and some of them are missing their knives, and these were obviously the ones that were played with by whoever owned this back in the day, and that's nothing that a bit of kit bashing won't solve. It'll give me an excuse to raid my bits box. Anyway, a pretty nice haul of miniatures to start off with. All a bit homogenous, no special or heavy weapons in the box, but all the more reason to go out and buy a few blister packs to add to your gang, or start getting creative with your spares. As you may know, the new version of Necromunda came out in 2017, and a friend of the channel gave me a few Goliaths that came in the box. Here they are side by side for comparison. The Games Workshop are obviously working on a different scale these days, but the difference in detail is crazy. Everything is so much crisper and there is so much going on, but I still think seeing them side by side, the 1995 models are quite charming, even if they look like angry children on steroids next to their 2017 cousins. So that's the miniatures covered. Before we take a look at the terrain, let's open this final baggie. Here we've got all of the tokens that we used in the game to remind you that you were out of ammo, had loot, or were on Overwatch, stuff like that. There's also a selection of dice, some cardboard blast and flamer templates, as well as 2 of these little plastic measuring sticks. This was made back in the day when you weren't allowed to pre-measure distances in Games Workshop games, so in the shooting phase, for example, you'd declare your shot and then find out if it was in range. If it wasn't, you missed automatically. Now the part I've been looking forward to, let's talk about the buildings that come in the box. You get 30 of these plastic bulkheads split up into 4 designs. You get 10 of these solid sections, 10 more of these open designs, 5 doorways, and 5 of these Gothic arch bulkheads. These solid plastic parts can be connected one on top of the other, and they all have the same slot and groove system at the edges of the bulkheads to slot in the cardboard catwalks. And you get plenty of them in the box. A good mix of cool shapes and a nice variety that come together to create your very own maze of industrial buildings. Loads of really vibrant blues contrasted with lots of black and yellow hazard stripes. Just like the cardstock ruins in the 2nd edition box, these seem to have been punched out of the sheets they came in, but they're still unused. The edges haven't even been folded. So let's do the honours and build some of the terrain to show you what sort of stuff you can make with just one box. The terrain in this box is simple, but it's very, very effective, and at the end of your game you can just disassemble it all and store it back in the box. One of the main things I love about Necromunda was how your gang could interact with terrain, jumping between buildings, throwing people off them, strategically positioning your gangers around catwalks to make them harder to hit, and falling to your death if you happen to be shot near an open edge. In 2017, when the remake was announced, I was so excited, but as soon as I saw the official photos of the box contents, I just thought, that's not Necromunda. It was flat, like a board game. The starter box didn't even cover the rules for vertical play. You had to buy one of the many expansions. A couple of years after Necromunda 95 was released, it had an expansion called Outlanders, which added more backstory, ported in from the old White Dwarf exclusive game Confrontation, with guilds, outlaws, bounty hunters, nobles, and even aliens. Contrast that to the current Necromunda game, which has had over a dozen expansions in 3 years. Now, I don't want to keep comparing the original Necromunda release to its modern counterpart, but I think there's something quite special about the old one. Now, I know it might seem like a big claim here, but here it goes. I think 90s Necromunda is the perfect first tabletop game. Now, hear me out. Not many people know this, but the rules are available for free. When they retired the game back in 2003, Games Workshop released the Necromunda Living Rulebook as a free PDF on their website, which was a combination of both the Rulebook and the Sourcebook with a few updates thrown in. There's also the great Necromunda Community Edition rule set, which is available through the hobby site Yak Tribe. It's a fan-edited version of the rules that clear up ambiguous wording and improve the flow of the gameplay. So basically, if you want to spend a bit of time learning a new rule set, you can start right now. And it's totally free. Now obviously the models and terrain aren't free, but as I said earlier in the video, kit bashing models and scratch building scenery is the very essence of this game. Use any heroic scale human models you like, customize them, get creative and make your own terrain. I mean, I've made a few videos on how to scratch build industrial terrain for free from household junk. And being realistic here, a couple of squads is all you need to get going, and the chances are if you're watching this video, you're already in the hobby to some degree, so you might already have them. To give you an idea, here are some of the Necromunda gangs Penny and I used a few years ago. Here's my Chaos Cultist gang, the Dark Talons. I like the idea of agile close combat fighters, so I used the gang rules for Escher. Here's Penny's Genestealer cult gang, the Shivers, which used the Orlock rules. Here's the Duluth Misfits, made using 40k bits and the old Wargames Factory Apocalypse Survivors kit, which I ran as Van Saar. And here's my most recent gang, Blackneck's Gore Boys, using Age of Sigmar Beastmen models, kit bashed with Imperial Guard and Space Marine Scout bits. Perfect alternatives to the official Goliath models. As you can see, when I got back into Necromunda in 2014, I didn't actually use any of the official Necromunda models, and honestly, I had a great time playing it. The Living Rulebook and Community Editions are also searchable PDFs, so you can quickly find rules that you want to look up without scouring lengthy rulebooks. At some point, I'd absolutely love to run a small Necromunda campaign on the channel, maybe in 2021, do something really special with it. I'm not sure how many views it would get, but I think if the narrative and the gangs are fun enough, it should be a pretty entertaining watch even if you don't know how to play yourself. So, very long story short, I want to see a 90s Necromunda revival. Also, I think we should start calling it Retromunda so there's no confusion with the new one. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I know this has been a bit longer than my usual videos, but I hope you've enjoyed rediscovering this 90s tabletop legend with me. Special thanks to our amazing Patreon supporters who let me do this as a full-time job. I can't put into words how grateful I am. And here's a quick shout out to our latest patrons. Sam, Extra Sleepy Alex, Michael Banish, Kyla Delaney, Varg Skeletor, Richard Schofield, Bale Hay, Benjamin Bowles, Chris B, David Billing, Ryan Bozich, Irish Stew, Joe Barco, Alan Gardner, Maker of the Night, John Crichton Griffiths, Chris Smith, Tiffy, Zephyr444, and Arson of the Blazing Skies. I've been Guy, you've been watching Midwinter Minis. Don't forget to check out the new Necromunda Underhive game, follow the link in the description to let them know I sent you, and I'll hopefully catch you next time. Bye for now.